Welcome back, everyone, to the Cryptic Nights podcast. This is your host, and I'm thrilled to have you here for our third episode. For those of you joining us for the first time, we dive deep into the shadows of the unknown, exploring eerie stories, unsettling legends, and mysterious phenomena that linger just beyond the veil of the ordinary. To all my returning listeners, thank you for your continued support. Your love for the dark and mysterious is what keeps this podcast alive. Tonight, we're delving into a particularly haunting tale, one that has gripped the imaginations of many and inspired both fear and fascination. That's right, tonight we're talking about the infamous Dybbuk Box. What is a Dybbuk Box? The Dybbuk Box is not just any ordinary artifact. It's an object that carries with it the weight of an ancient and sinister presence. Originating from Jewish folklore, the Dybbuk Box is said to house a malevolent spirit known as a Dybbuk. Now, what exactly is a Dybbuk, you might ask? In Jewish tradition, a Dybbuk is believed to be the restless spirit of a deceased person who, instead of finding peace in the afterlife, remains trapped in our world. These spirits are said to cling to life, often out of anger, unfinished business, or sheer malevolence. They can attach themselves to living beings, or, as in the case of the Dybbuk Box, to inanimate objects. The legend of the Dybbuk Box as we know it today began with a seemingly innocuous wine cabinet, purchased by a man at an estate sale. But what followed after the purchase was anything but ordinary. The man claimed that once he brought the cabinet home, he began experiencing a series of terrifying and unexplained events. Nightmares, strange smells, and an overwhelming sense of dread. It was as if the box itself was alive, haunted by the spirit of a Dybbuk that refused to let go. Stories like these have made the Dybbuk Box infamous, with many believing that opening the box releases the spirit within, bringing misfortune and suffering to anyone who comes into contact with it. But is it just a modern-day myth, or is there some truth to this terrifying tale? That's what we're here to explore tonight. Now let me take you back to the year 2001, to a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. It was here that a man named Kevin Mannis would come into possession of something that would change his life forever. Kevin was a seasoned antique dealer, always on the lookout for unique items with history and character. One day, he stumbled upon a small estate sale, hosted by the family of a recently deceased Holocaust survivor. Among the various trinkets and heirlooms, Kevin's eye was drawn to a peculiar wooden wine cabinet. It was simple in design, yet there was something about it, something that seemed to call out to him. Without hesitation, Kevin purchased the cabinet, unaware of the darkness he was about to unleash. The granddaughter of the deceased woman warned him that the box had always been kept hidden away, sealed tight, and never opened. She explained that her grandmother had insisted it contained a Dybbuk, a spirit trapped inside, and that it should never be disturbed. Kevin, a skeptic at heart, brushed off the warning as mere superstition. After all, he had encountered countless artifacts with supposed curses or haunted histories, none of which had ever proven to be more than a story. But this time, things would be different. When Kevin brought the cabinet back to his shop, strange things began to happen. At first, it was subtle, a feeling of unease, the faint smell of jasmine flowers, and the occasional flickering of lights. But soon, the occurrences became more intense. Unexplained shadows would dance on the walls, objects would move on their own, and a deep, guttural voice could sometimes be heard whispering in the dead of night. It wasn't long before Kevin started having horrific nightmares, vivid and terrifying. He dreamed of an old, haggard woman with empty eyes, always reaching out to him, always trying to say something he couldn't understand. These nightmares began to take a toll on him, leaving him exhausted, paranoid, and deeply disturbed. Determined to rid himself of the cabinet, Kevin decided to sell it. But with each new owner, the same pattern of misfortune and terror followed. The box would always find its way back to Kevin, as if the spirit within had chosen him and would not let go. Desperate, Kevin turned to research, digging into the history of the box. He discovered that the cabinet had indeed come from Poland, where it had been used in a ritual to trap a Dybbuk, a spirit that had caused great suffering during its life. The ritual had been performed by a group of rabbis, who believed that trapping the spirit in the box was the only way to prevent it from wreaking havoc on the living. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Kevin sought the help of a rabbi, hoping to perform an exorcism to cleanse the box and free himself from the curse. But the ritual only seemed to anger the spirit further. The shadows grew darker, the nightmares more violent, and the box, it began to emit a low, menacing hum. Finally, in a moment of sheer desperation, Kevin sealed the box with wax, just as the previous owner had done, and buried it deep in his basement, hoping that it would stay hidden and forgotten. But the story of the Dybbuk Box didn't end there. Over the years, it resurfaced, passed from one unfortunate owner to the next, each one experiencing the same relentless torment. To this day, the true origin and power of the Dybbuk Box remain a mystery. Is it simply an old wine cabinet with a dark legend attached to it? Or is there really a malevolent spirit trapped inside, waiting for the next unsuspecting victim to set it free? And so, my dear listeners, as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember the story of the Dybbuk Box. Whether you believe in its power or dismiss it as mere superstition, one thing is certain: the darkness within it is very real to those who have encountered it. The Dybbuk Box, a tale of terror. In the quiet streets of Warsaw, Poland, during the early 1900s, there was a small antique shop run by an old woman named Miriam. Miriam was known in the town for her vast collection of curious items, many of which had mysterious origins. Among the shelves filled with ancient trinkets and dusty books was a peculiar wooden box. It was a small, unassuming chest, roughly the size of a jewelry box, crafted from a dark wood that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Intricately carved on the surface were symbols from an ancient, forgotten language. Miriam kept it locked away in a glass cabinet, warning customers never to touch it. The box had been in Miriam's possession for decades, handed down from her grandmother, who had acquired it under unusual circumstances. The story, as Miriam told it, was that her grandmother, a young woman at the time, had purchased the box from a peddler who was desperate to get rid of it. The peddler, an old man with wild, fearful eyes, had warned her grandmother of a terrible curse that came with the box. He spoke of a Dybbuk, a malicious spirit from Jewish folklore that could possess the living. The box, he claimed, was a prison for one such spirit, trapped by a powerful rabbi long ago. But Miriam's grandmother, who did not believe in such superstitions, took the box home and kept it as a decorative piece. It wasn't long before strange things began to happen in her grandmother's home. Objects would move on their own, whispers could be heard in empty rooms, and an overwhelming sense of dread filled the house. Miriam's grandmother, once skeptical, now feared the box, but she could not bring herself to get rid of it. She believed the Dybbuk had attached itself to her, and releasing the box might unleash the spirit upon someone else. Years passed, and the box was eventually passed down to Miriam. Unlike her grandmother, Miriam had no intention of keeping it. She placed it in her shop, hoping that someone else would take it off her hands. But even as the years went by, no one dared to purchase the box. Customers would inquire about it, only to be deterred by Miriam's warnings. One autumn evening, a young man named David entered the shop. He was a traveler, passing through Warsaw on his way to Krakow. David was drawn to the old shop, fascinated by the strange and unusual. As he browsed the shelves, his eyes fell upon the box in the glass cabinet. There was something about it that intrigued him. Ignoring Miriam's warnings, he insisted on buying the box. Reluctantly, Miriam sold it to him, feeling a strange sense of relief as he walked out of the shop with the box under his arm. David returned to his hotel room, eager to examine his new purchase. He placed the box on the table and carefully opened it. Inside, he found a small, crumpled piece of parchment covered in faded Hebrew text. As he tried to read the words, a sudden gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candle he had lit. The room plunged into darkness, and David felt a chill run down his spine. He could hear the sound of faint whispers all around him, though he was alone. The air grew heavy, and a sense of unease settled over him. In the days that followed, David began to experience strange phenomena. He would wake up in the middle of the night to find the box open, even though he had closed it before going to bed. His belongings would be moved, and sometimes he would hear the soft, mournful cry of a child echoing through the empty halls of the hotel. At first, he dismissed these events as mere coincidences, but as they grew more frequent, He could no longer deny that something was terribly wrong. One night, as David lay in bed, he was awakened by a feeling of intense pressure on his chest. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt as though something was sitting on him, pinning him down. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a shadowy figure standing at the foot of his bed. The figure was tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. It stared at him for what felt like an eternity before slowly fading away. When the pressure on his chest finally lifted, David gasped for air, his body trembling with fear. Desperate for answers, David sought out a local rabbi known for his knowledge of the occult. The rabbi listened intently as David recounted his experiences and examined the box. His expression grew grave as he read the inscription on the parchment. "This box is cursed," the rabbi said solemnly. "It contains a Dybbuk, a restless spirit that seeks to possess the living. It was bound to this box by a powerful Kabbalist to prevent it from causing harm. By opening the box, you have released the spirit." David was horrified. "What can I do?" he asked, his voice shaking. "There is only one way to stop the Dybbuk," the rabbi replied. "You must perform a ritual to bind the spirit back into the box. But be warned, the ritual is dangerous. The Dybbuk will resist with all its might." With the rabbi's guidance, David prepared for the ritual. They gathered the necessary items: a silver knife, a jar of holy water, and a handful of earth from a sacred burial ground. The rabbi drew a protective circle on the floor and placed the box in the center. As they began the ritual, the air grew thick with tension. The lights flickered, and the room grew colder with each passing moment. As the rabbi chanted the ancient incantations, David could feel the presence of the Dybbuk growing stronger. The whispers turned into screams, and the shadowy figure appeared once more, its form more solid and terrifying than before. It lunged at David, its eyes burning with rage. But the rabbi was prepared. He threw the holy water at the spirit, causing it to recoil in pain. The Dybbuk let out a blood-curdling scream, its form writhing and contorting as it was forced back into the box. With the final words of the incantation, the lid of the box slammed shut, and the room fell silent. The Dybbuk was once again imprisoned, its malevolent power contained. David, exhausted and shaken, thanked the rabbi for his help. The rabbi warned him to take the box to a remote location and bury it deep within the earth, where it would never be found. David followed the rabbi's advice. He traveled to a secluded forest and buried the box in an unmarked grave, hoping that it would remain hidden forever. As he walked away from the site, he felt a sense of relief, as though a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But deep down, he knew that the Dybbuk was still out there, waiting for the day when someone, driven by curiosity or greed, would uncover the box and unleash its terror once more. Years passed, and the story of the Dybbuk box faded into obscurity, becoming little more than a ghost story told by old-timers. But legends have a way of persisting, and the box's whereabouts eventually became a subject of speculation and rumor. Some claimed that it had been found by treasure hunters, while others insisted that it had been lost to time. But one thing was certain: the Dybbuk's curse still lingered, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon it. And so, the box remains buried, hidden from the world, but never truly gone. It is said that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint whispers of the Dybbuk, calling out from its wooden prison, yearning for release. But heed this warning: should you ever come across an old, intricately carved wooden box with strange symbols, leave it be, for inside may lie a restless spirit, eager to break free, and once unleashed, it may be impossible to contain. Join us next time on Cryptic Nights podcast as we delve deeper into the darkness with another spine-tingling tale of terror. Until then, stay safe, dear listeners. And remember, to stay updated with more bone-chilling tales like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and smash that like button. Until next time, stay spooky, my friends.